In this video, we're going to talk about designing websites in Photoshop. This won't be a step-by-step explanation, but I am going to show you some tricks and techniques to use when designing. But why Photoshop? We could design in the browser or use Sketch or Elementor, and frankly, sometimes that's exactly what you should do. But designing websites in Photoshop allows you to focus on the design of a website without getting bogged down in technical thinking. That's why we do custom designs in 2 stages, design and then build. We focus on designing how the website will look, and once we get that approved, then we can start building the actual website. So here is a design we did for Alert You Now. They do home security and automation. There's a slideshow here. It actually has several slides. Here's another one, for example. You'll see I have groups on the right-hand side here, and each of them has their own slide. We have some icons here, some testimonials, has a very subtle gradient overlay. And we have a place for a video. Of course, this isn't a real video, it's just a representation of the video. And then we have a section for getting a quote. And we also have social media icons and some other icons that the customer wanted on the website. So let's just say we were going to build this from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and just open a new Photoshop document. We'll bring this over here. And you could do web, and you might as well. You could choose 1366 or 920, or any of these, right here will work just fine. These first 3 would be fine. So I'm just going to choose 1440. Actually, I'm going to go full on 1920. We're going to do 1080p. In Photoshop, we have artboards, and sometimes that's useful to have multiple artboards, especially if you want to design more than one page. Most of the time, we only design the home page, though. But let's go ahead and see if we can rebuild pieces of this. At the top, we have a logo. I'm going to move this over here, actually, so I can kind of drag things in and out. Okay, I'm going to make a header right now. And I just made a shape, and shapes are really useful in Photoshop when designing websites because they allow you to make containers. You can also snap things inside the containers. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. I'm going to make a header, just going to make it white, but I'm going to put just a very subtle drop shadow under it. We're just going to make it nice and subtle. A lot of times in the old days, you might have had like really fat, dark drop shadows, and really calling attention to themselves. We don't want to do that. We just want a nice, subtle, nothing too extreme drop shadow here, maybe 1 pixel down. So something just enough to give it a little bit of division. And we'll say 25 opacity. Something you'll notice too is my blend mode is normal, it's not multiply. The reason why is because on the web, when you do a drop shadow, it's not going to be multiplied. So you might as well use normal when designing a website. We're going to bring in the logo. And something I would do early on when I'm making designs, I oftentimes determine a max width. Sometimes it might be 1,000 or 1,200 or even 1,300 pixels wide. We'll do 1,200 pixels wide. And the easiest way to do that is just to make a shape, make it that size, then do Control-A to select everything, then click here to center it. Then we can easily just make guides that snap to this, that will snap to this shape. And now we can make sure that everything falls within this max width, or at least everything that we want to. There might be elements that break out of that max width, and that's totally fine. But here's our header, and here's our logo. And I'm going to grab in this little BBB icon that we made. I'll just stick it right here. And I'm going to bring in the phone number, put it right here. And of course, these have been a little bit styled already, but a lot of times you'll take a little time and decide what font makes sense for a website. This one is Lato. So I'm going to grab a shape and make a bar. And we're going to give it a color. I think I'll choose the same color as what's in the logo. And maybe I will make a very faint drop shadow on here as well. I think honestly what I have there is good. It's just a nice subtle drop shadow. Then we're going to put some text on here. Let's say home. And actually make this white and make it a little smaller. So I'm going to click here. Let's do maybe 18. Looks good. I'll say home, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, products. And there's lots of ways you can go about this. The easiest way in my experience is just to do some spaces in between. You're just trying to represent what it's going to look like. It looks pretty good. Then you might adjust the font size as needed. We have a bunch of icons we've already designed for websites. So if you ever need icons, you can go to Launch Success. We have an article about it. Maybe I'll include a link to that. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna make this just a little wider so it goes the full width. Not that it matters that much, but I wanna make sure that we're consistent. You can resize shapes by doing Control T. You probably know this anyway. Now I'm going to grab a big shape and we're gonna make a slideshow. And in this case, we have this image that I made, and you'll notice how it's faded on the edges. That's kind of important to understand because when I originally had this image, let me kind of take the mask off. I can take this image and I can just clip it right into this shape by holding down Alt and clicking in between the two layers. And then this will stay inside of the images directly above. But when making a slideshow like this one we did for Alert You Now, this slideshow actually goes the entire width, right? Like so. But having these sharp edges isn't always desirable. So we can use a mask and use the gradient tool. And let me show you how to make a mask just in case you don't know. So you make a mask on an image or whatever by going down here to mask, clicking on that. And then if you paint with a paintbrush, you can actually paint, let me use a better, more normal brush. So you can use the paintbrush to mask things out and also put them back in, which is very useful. So I'm going to use essentially everything that is black would be invisible and everything that is white is totally visible and shades of gray are partially visible. So by using a gradient, I can do a black to white gradient, for example. And actually I'm going to use the transparent. I'm just going to choose the black. So now we're doing black to transparent. The reason why that's useful is then when I'm going on both sides, I can easily fade that in from the sides. In the original one, I think I took much more care to be much more careful about how I made that gradient, but that's the process in a nutshell. I think I actually went, as I'm looking at this, I think I faded a lot more on this side. Maybe I could resize this a little bit. You know, we can do what we want. And then I took some text, put it in here. On the website, this is not actually part of the image. It is actual text that I made in HTML and CSS. But this gives you the kind of the idea. I don't want to spend too much time on everything. So that's the basics of how you can make some elements for a website in Photoshop. You'll want to have a header, a navigation, possibly a banner, some content underneath. Let me show you a few more things actually. If I wanted to get some text, I could just grab a text box. And the way I did that is I pushed T on my keyboard, or you can click over here. We'll just click here and just write a little bit of text. It's white, so let's change that to black. That looks good. Well, not really, but. So anyways, you have some content here. At the bottom of most websites, you're going to want to make sure that you have a footer. A lot of times you can just drag a bar across and give it a color. Let's maybe use that blue color. Sometimes I'd like to make my footers just a little darker than the things at the top, but that's not always necessary. What do I have on the original website? Yeah, there's a quote form. I'm not going to go into that much level of detail, I think, for this. I do want to show you how to export individual images. So I'm going to choose this logo right here. I'm going to right click and choose Export As. Here I can resize the image if needed, but I'm just going to go with this size right now and hit Export All. And I'll just call it like alert logo. And then if I go into this pictures folder here, you'll see the logo. Now you'll see it's about 28 kilobytes, which is a little bigger than I'd want it to be. But there's a fantastic website that I use called tinyping.com. If I take this image and I just drop it in here, it'll resize it. And now instead of being 28 kilobytes, it's just 6, which is a lot better. Load really fast on the website, which is great. Then just save it. Just save over the original. Now we have a nice small ping that will load quickly on the website. And you can do the same thing with other elements. With this particular slideshow, I actually tried to make sure when I actually did this in real life, I sort of made it like a certain width so that they're all the same width. And then I made sure that they always fade to a solid color. And on the website, let me pull it up as well. On the website, everything fades to this solid color. And I have an interface in the back here I'll show you, where each slide has an image that fades to a solid color. I give it an ID and I give it a solid background color. So I choose the color and it fades to that color. And when I design the slides, I make sure that I design them with a background shape that is a solid color. So this goes to this nice blue background, this one to this nice dark blue, and this one to kind of a beige, this one to a little bit more rich beige, but you get the idea. So when you make a design preview, you need to get this to the customer, and you don't just send them a JPEG in an email. That's not usually the best way to do it. What you do is you export the JPEG, and then you're going to make a small web page that just basically has that image in it. I'm going to show you how that's done. So I'm going to right click on this artboard here and just going to export it. Let's see, export as. And I'm going to save it as a JPEG. I'm not going to resize it or anything. Quality 65 is not bad. So let's click export all, and we're going to just save this. Now we have this image right here in this folder. And I'm going to upload this. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to log into Plesk. You could do this other ways if you want to as well, but this is the way I usually do it. Let's go to alert you now. So I go into their account and I click on files and just kind of save it wherever. I think I might have some previews in here. Maybe I don't. Well, I'll make one. So I'm going to say new, create file, and we'll just call this preview.html. And yeah, why not? We'll use the HTML template. Now I have this preview HTML file, and I can just say the title is like preview, and all I really need is I just need an image, right? Like so. And let's just hit OK. I actually need to upload the image. So if I hit upload and I find my image right here, I'm going to upload it. Perfect. It should be in here. There it is. I'm going to copy this. I'm just going to paste it in right there. And now, if I save that, and if I go to alertyonow.com and type in /preview.html, you'll see we have our image. Now it doesn't look centered right now. It's got a few little problems. And I'm just going to include an example HTML file that kind of fixes all these little issues. And I'll just include it with the video. But basically you upload your file, you put it in an HTML file, you do some very basic styling, and then you can show it to people and let them see it, and they can review it and say, oh, I like that, but change this and that. And once they're happy, then you can actually start building the website. Here's that same preview with just a little bit more styling. It's centered and has a light gray background. It's pretty simple. I added just a couple of lines of CSS. The body, I put a margin of 0 and background just light gray. On the image, I put display block and margin auto for the left and right. That's what makes it centered. And that's pretty much it. And then you can show it to the customer, they can make the revisions, and once they approve it, you can just start building the website for real. So hopefully this was helpful and taught you a few things that maybe you didn't know before. Designing websites, of course, is a problem-solving task. It is not a step-by-step thing that you can just watch a tutorial and then just do it. But you can learn a lot from watching other people and seeing how they do things. There's probably a million other things I could show you. So I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, I guess Google is a wonderful resource. And that's all.